Okay, so there was a bit of confusion about emulsion shocks versus bladder shocks. One of my buddies was having a lot of trouble trying to get air out of his shocks, and they're emulsion shocks. So you're never going to get all of your air out of the emulsion shock. It needs to be there to account for hydraulic lock. So the best example I can give I have here, it's just a syringe. I'm just using a paintbrush because it's something straight and cylindrical that I had. And this is just a dispensing syringe filled with water. So imagine this is your shock. Imagine this is your cap here. This is going to move, and that's part of what I'm trying to show here. And then this would be your shock body and your shock shaft. I know there's no piston in here, but that doesn't really matter. The point is that as you compress the shock, the shaft is going to go in, and it's going to take up space inside the shock body, which is going to put pressure inside the shock. If you don't have air to take up all that expansion, or a bladder, which will allow expansion, by basically what this is going to simulate, the piston will move, or this plunger will move. So you can see as we compress this, as we push the brush in, you can see it's moving, and this is nowhere near even touching that plunger, but it moved the plunger. If you don't have any air in the shock, that can't move. There's nowhere for this extra pressure to go, and the shaft will get stuck. So, to simulate that, we'll hold the shaft still. Try to push this plunger in. You can't move it. It will not move. So I'm going to take this out, get rid of a little bit of this water, or just say a lot of the water here. Alright, so this is about halfway full now. You can see it's about half empty. So now, if I try to push this plunger is actually pretty easy to push now. So this is the principle behind your emulsion shock. The air is there to do what this is doing, to give you room for compression and for the shaft to take up room in here. Now this is still moving a little bit. It's still going to move a little bit just because this plunger is too easy to move. But you could see before you could not compress this, and now we can. So if I take this out again, push all this air out. So now you can see this is completely filled again. It's incompressible. Absolutely, this cannot be pushed down. You can see I'm actually flexing the ears on this. Whereas before, you could actually push this plunger in, and it would move. So these emulsion type shocks without a bladder, they need this air in them to allow for compression. Otherwise, you're just going to hydraulically lock it. The reason I don't like emulsion shocks is that, for me, they're very hard to build consistently. It's hard to keep the same amount of air inside them because you're counting on squeezing a little bit of the oil out of the top of the shock. I really don't care for that. I really prefer that I can sit the bladder on top of the shock, and that will actually give me a much more consistent zero rebound result. Now, I do mostly on-roads. These shocks are a lot smaller than the off-road shocks, but it's just my personal preference. That air is always going to be in an emulsion shock. It's going to get churned into the oil. That's just how they are. There's no avoiding it.